Hello, everyone. Welcome to Waddscon. It's great to see people joining. Please say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're from, what you're doing. The chat room for these events is usually quite noisy, and I expect it to be especially so for this. You can also follow us on whatever social media you use, typically Twitter, where there's quite a noisy conversation develops. And the hashtag there is Waddscon. We're going to kick off in about 30 seconds or so. But before we do that, I want to thank you for joining this edition of Waddscon. Today's session is going to explore the impact of artificial intelligence on public relations and the public sphere. It's very timely because we've seen a huge slew of tools launched based on the GPT-3 dataset in the past 3 months or so, since November 2022. I want to thank everyone that's bought a ticket today. We've raised £1,000 incredibly for our local food bank in Newcastle, and thank you all for that. Each of the speakers today is going to talk about a different aspect of artificial intelligence. We'll hear about the applications of some of the new tools. We'll hear about the impact on the media and the public sphere, and cover a variety of issues. Now, we've got a completely international panel today. Practitioners joining us from Bulgaria, Portugal, and also the UK. We've got Andrew Smith, who's first up. He's a PR engineer and technologist. We've got a digital creative, Mark Rofe. We've got Maya Koleva from a public relations measurement, I call her maven, measurement specialist, and Bruno Amaral, an old friend who is a philosopher, a bit of a philosopher when it all comes to all things internet. You'll find out why shortly. They're each going to speak for 5 minutes, followed by Q&A. If you questions along the way, please drop them into the chat. I'll curate some of those, and we'll have a conversation with each of the speakers after they've presented. So we're going to head to London first and talk to Andrew. Andrew runs his own consulting firm called Escherman. He's a public relations engineer, and he's a technologist focused on data and workflow to support the effectiveness and value of public relations. Andrew, hello. You there?
Hello. Yes.
Hello.
I'm here.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Good. We had a few gremlins in practice, so I just wanted to make sure. You're going to talk about the potential impact of GPT-3 on public relations and what you've discovered. I mean, you've been very busy over the last 3 months testing some of these tools.
Indeed.
Welcome, and thanks for sharing your stories.
Indeed. But I share my screen as well. That might be equally germane to the discussion. So fingers crossed everyone can see that. So thanks for being here. Conscious we've all got 5 to 8 minutes, 10 minutes to cram in as much information as possible. You said I've been busy for the last 3 months or so. I think I've been busy for the last 30 years looking at AI and what a time to be alive. I'm going to try and avoid kind of going over, I think, a lot of stuff that I'm sure people are now sick to death of in some ways hearing about GPT-3, etc. But you know, patently, as you've already outlined, we just see this incredible explosion of AI tools. I know we're focused on GPT-3, but I just wanted to kind of expand it really from there a little bit because, well, hopefully, if my screen's going to let me do it. There we go. Oops, it's getting ahead of me. It isn't just about GPT. ChatGPT is one specific example of a class of tools known as generative AI. GPT focuses on the generation of text-based content. We've also seen generative AI in the image space, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, all those tools. We're seeing text to video. My prediction before the year is out, we'll have true text to video capability from a text prompt, an entire video created from the ground up simply by inputting that particular input. So all of that. Sidebar on audio. I don't know if anyone's tried out a tool called 11 Labs. Amazing and scary in equal measures. The 11 Labs tool allows you to upload 1 minute of audio of yourself speaking, or as it turns out, anybody talking, and 1 minute is enough for it to clone that voice, and then you can get that voice to say anything you want it to simply by inputting text. What a surprise, that's already been taken advantage of in a rather nefarious way. Somebody cloned Emma Watson's voice and got her to read passages from Mein Kampf. Others have cloned Eminem doing a rap song, rapping about ChatGPT. That video came down within 24 hours. Unsurprisingly, I suspect lawyers on that like hawks. So what's happened, and again, I think you've heard this quite a lot already, ChatGPT, launched at the end of November last year, has kind of acted as like incredible catalyst for a number of things. It has certainly democratized access to certainly GPT. At the last count, I think there was 100 million users worldwide, fastest growing technology in history. By now, that's probably gone up to 150 million. It'll show no signs of slowing down. I know I've been out and about talking to agencies and organizations over the last several weeks. There's a lot of demand out there for people for guidance as to what to do. And I think partly people are getting very fazed by this whole idea of there's so many tools. Where do I start? A couple of good resources I can recommend. This one you're seeing a screenshot of is called Future Tools, started by AI expert Matt Wolf. He launched it at the end of December last year. I discovered it in the first week of January. There were about 100 tools at that time. When I looked this morning, there are close to 900 AI tools now in that database. So nearly 800 new tools that Matt's discovered in the last 6 weeks or so. But I like this because it allows you to search, filter. It's done organized along various kind of categories that make it kind of easier to trawl. Other good thing as well, I think, from the perspective of trying things out, the vast majority of tools that I've encountered so far are certainly free in the first instance. So no excuse for not having a look at some of these things. And I'd urge everyone to do that. Don't hold back. Try these things out. See what's out there. Get an actual hands-on experience of what they might be capable of, are capable of, limitations, etc. Another resource is the AI Cyclopedia. Similar kind of thing. It's a huge database of AI tools, podcasts, resources, etc. But again, with the idea that it should try and help you at least have some semblance of being able to navigate your way through all of them. Use cases. Again, I don't want to kind of replicate what others might talk about, but if we're looking just particularly at PR, and we go back to just talking about GPT specifically in the first instance, yeah, it's fairly self-evident that from the perspective of writing and generating written content, of course, it can be used for a whole host of things relevant to PR. Press releases, social media content, communication plans, social media strategies. I did a workshop last week on crisis comms in digital, and I asked it to write a crisis comms digital plan, and it did. I'm not saying it was really good, but the ability for it to at least generate a first pass or to act as a critique of what you've already created, excellent. But it's not just creating content. Use it for creating crisis comms scenarios. ChatGPT as a media trainer. I think this is a great one. This is where you can ask ChatGPT to act as something. In this case, ask it to act as a journalist. Ask ChatGPT to be a journalist writing for the Financial Times, and you are the CEO of, let's pretend it's a major energy corporation, and ask ChatGPT to ask you awkward questions about your latest financial results. That's the kind of I think creative use that I think it can be applied to, with the constant caveat that don't just accept what it gives you off the bat. You still need to apply some sort of critical evaluation of what it gives back to you. But I think there are a whole raft of ways in which ChatGPT specifically, and again, an ever-growing list of writing-driven AI tools can help with. To get even more specific about tools that I would personally definitely urge people to check out in the first instance, there are clearly potentially thousands out there that you could look at. But I've singled these out, because I think they add and support tools that virtually everyone either uses day in, day out, or certainly can get access to very, very easily and inexpensively. So first of all, it's an extension for Google Sheets and Docs called, quite simply, ChatGPT for Google Docs and Sheets. What this does, a little nuance here, is it brings the power and functionality of ChatGPT directly into Google Docs and Google Sheets. In the case of Google Docs, what's nice is that rather than going out and logging into ChatGPT separately, and certainly if you're using the free version, you won't even get in because there are too many people also trying to get in. Even with the paid version, that sort of an annoying toggling back and forth might not be to your taste. Having the effectively the ChatGPT interface directly embedded within the document format again allows you to put in a prompt, get the output back, but the output goes straight into your document. Then you can use whatever you iterated in the document as the starting point for iterating with further prompts. So the nuance there is that you do pay for it, but again, all you have to do is to create an OpenAI account. Once you've done that, that costs nothing. You would then be able to get a so-called API key. You copy and paste that to put into the extension to get it to use it. So you are charged technically per token, per character, per word, but at the moment, certainly, it's not very expensive. I've been beating it to death for weeks, and I think I've racked a bill of about $5. And again, so compared to, say, paying $20 a month for access to the paid version of ChatGPT, this actually be quite a kind of cost-effective way of doing it. And it's integrated with the tool you'll probably use. The Google Sheets extension, I think, is mind-blowing. It introduces GPT into Google Sheets as a function. It's worth us comprehending what that means. So, for example, let's say I have existing data. I can immediately apply GPT to that data and output the results into the spreadsheet. Analyze literally thousands of headlines or pieces of content contained in those cells, and I output the analysis straight into another cell. That becomes itself an input potentially to use with other functions. Even Google Slides, there is now an extension for Google Slides, which effectively turns it into an AI-powered presentation tool. So you want to create a presentation quickly, have the Magic Slides extension, put in your prompt, and it writes the slides for you. There we go. Back with Google Sheets. Google in December released a free add-on for Google Sheets called Simple ML, which stands for machine learning. This has had virtually no attention paid to it at all, but I think potentially equally important as ChatGPT itself. I'll explain. Machine learning as a concept is not new. The promise of being able to use machine learning on big data to gain insights that we otherwise wouldn't get. Again, a lot of talk about it, but particularly in the context of public relations, it's never really happened. I think mainly because until now, you would need some substantial resources in terms of computing, expertise, etc., in order to be able to do it. What the Simple ML add-on for Sheets does is to say, look, anyone who has data in a Google Sheet can now apply machine learning to it using this. There are a whole raft of ways in which this might be applicable in a PR context. Again, taking data you already got, whether it's media coverage data or any other form of data. Maybe you've downloaded some large public data sets from the ONS or other sources. Maybe you've done that already in the past and gone, great, I've got a huge data set, but what do I do with it now? How am I going to mine it for insight? Put it into a spreadsheet, apply the machine learning add-on, and it'll come back. It'll detect patterns and insights that you may never have discovered yourself. That might be useful for a whole raft of things: research, audience planning, coming up with story angles, data-driven story ideas for pitches, etc. Also good at plugging in holes in your data. Let's say you've got data on certain things and not on others. The machine learning uses a technique called modeling to look at what you do have, to then try and accurately estimate what the gaps might look like. Arguably, we've all been exposed to this already. Anyone who has been using Google Analytics or Google Analytics 4 for the last several years most definitely has been exposed to it because Google's been using it. Because of the increasing rise of GDPR and people not consenting to be tracked, you end up with only data on the people who said yes. So what Google says is, we'll take the people who have said yes, we've captured their data, and we'll use it to model the behavior of those that said no, to build out a more complete picture. In terms of the Chrome browser, there's just a never-ending list of really, I think, incredibly useful Chrome extensions. I'm just listing a couple here. The AI PRM extension is amazing. It's effectively turning into a kind of crowdsourced library of useful prompts for SEO, content, PR, etc., accessible through ChatGPT once you've installed the extension. Web ChatGPT, very clever. It gets around the fact that GPT currently only trained on data up till the end of 2021. Web ChatGPT says, add in the top 3, 5, 10 Google search results into the corpus when you're creating the prompt. So that's bringing in more up-to-date content from that. And the YouTube summary, another great one, I think. This extension allows you to look at any YouTube video, automatically generate the transcript, then automatically use ChatGPT to summarize the transcript. Excellent if you're looking at long form video and thinking, do I want to watch this? Or if you already created the video and you want to generate that summary, the YouTube summary extension, completely free, really quite helpful. There are many, many others. These are just some that I think are absolutely very, very useful in a PR context right now today. So just that's a whistle stop tour, admittedly, but to sum all this up, I couldn't not end by having a massive plug for the just published or published yesterday CIPR report into AI tools and the impact on public relations practice. Mr. Waddington and I co-authored this with the fantastic assistance of Professor Anne Gregory at the University of Huddersfield and Jean Valin in the US. As well as another huge shout out to Scott Brinker, the man behind the Chief Martech database, who very, very kindly gave us full access to that database to assist us with our research. If you haven't done so already, the URL is there. Urge you, if you wouldn't mind, to download it, read it. If nothing else, if it inspires you to really focus your thinking on how, where, why AI can be applicable to your own role in PR practice, I'd say that's an amazing first step.
Andrew,
that was it.
Thank you so much. Big round of applause. We're out of time, I'm afraid, to ask questions. We've got a Zoom bug, or I haven't pressed the right button on when I've been setting this webinar up, because our chat isn't working with delegates. I'm really sorry about that. If you've got questions for Andrew, you can find him on Twitter, also on LinkedIn. He's active on both programs. Suggest you look him up there. If you've got questions for any of the panelists, please use Twitter with the hashtag Waddscon, and I'll pull questions from there. Andrew, thank you very much. Really Pleasure. Appreciate it. Next up, we got Mark Rofe, Digital Creative. Mark, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, sir. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good. Well, so do you want to load your deck while you're doing that? Mark's head of digital PR, newly appointed at an agency called Contrast. He's going to talk further about some creative applications of GPT-3 in practice. Mark, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm head of PR at Contrast. We're an e-commerce marketing agency. And I also teach digital PR on digitalprcourse.com. And as you said, I'm going to take you through some real world applications of ChatGPT in PR. So one thing you should know about me is that I run christmastrees.co.uk. And we sell and deliver Christmas trees all around the UK. Now, a couple of years back, I ran a campaign, which was a Freedom of Information request campaign, which basically obtained data for towns and cities across the UK and then ranked them from who spends the most and who spends the least. And I wanted to show you how I could replicate this campaign today by using ChatGPT. So first off, you'd need a template to use to get your Freedom of Information request. And what I've done here is I've grabbed a template from, I think it's called whatweknow.com. And I've just put it into ChatGPT, told it it's an FOI request, and then I said, use this as a template, write an FOI request to councils to find out how much towns and cities spend on Christmas lights and decorations. And it's come back with a pretty good template, I would say, for me to be able to do that. And one thing I've learned really just kind of been playing around with ChatGPT is that the quality of your output relies on the quality of your input. So if I'd have put in a really poor template here, it would have just given me rubbish out. But I put in, I would say, a half decent template that I managed to find. And yeah, something that came out is looking pretty good. Now, I've also been using it for ideation as well. So on this occasion, I just asked ChatGPT, I have government data on Christmas lights and decoration spends for towns and cities across the UK. What are the different news angles for a story using this data? And it's come up with all sorts of things here. And some of them are kind of obvious and some of them less so. For example, number 3 here actually wasn't really an idea that I would have thought of, which would have been to analyze the relationship between Christmas decoration spending and economic indicators such as GDP or unemployment rate. So I've kind of been using it in a way as like a second brain here. I've also been using it a little bit to do some maths. So if maths isn't your strong point, you can have a go at trying to use ChatGPT to help you out here. And here I've just asked it, basically I've told it that Dundee has a population of 148,000, how much it spends per year, how much does the average spend per 1,000 people? And it's come back with a calculation here, and I double checked this and it is correct. I think one thing you need to remember with this is that you should actually not trust anything it says in terms of facts or numbers unless you're able to double check it, or you kind of already know the answer. But it's still good, again, to use as a second brain. Maybe if I did this calculation myself and I wanted to check it, I'm able to do that. And it's a similar story for creating Excel formulas as well. So I was able to use a prompt to get it to give me an Excel formula, which I could then use to basically get all my data into an Excel sheet. And the thing that I think I was most impressed with this is that once I had all my data in a table, I basically told it to, using the data, telling it what each one was in the column, and I just copied and pasted it into there. And I said, write me a 500-word article with subheadings about this data, pick out the cities that spend the most and the least, and the cities that spend the most and least per 1,000 of the population. Now, I wasn't able to fit all of it on here, but what it wrote was actually, pretty good. Again, it would need fact checking. And I think it's easier to just take content and then polish it off rather than having something and just starting from scratch. I've also been using it to help me write some headlines. And here I just said, give me a list of 10 headlines for a news story about how much towns and cities spend on Christmas lights and decorations in the UK with data from Freedom of Information requests. Now, these headlines, I'll be honest with you, weren't particularly great. But after I kind of amended the prompt a little bit and told it to write me a list of 10 CTR optimized headlines, so click-through rate optimized headlines, it started to improve a little bit. And I'm actually seeing headlines similar to what I would have actually used. And you can play around with this a bit more too. So I told it to write headlines in the style of the Daily Mail. Couldn't fit all of them on here, but some of them were pretty hilarious. And I also got it to write headlines in the style of The Guardian. So all I did is I just repeated the prompt that I did before. And I just said, do it in the style of The Guardian or do it in the style of the Daily Mail. And I got the type of headlines that you would associate with those types of publications. So another thing that I've been using this for is once you've got your story and you're sending out your press release, I often will just include within the first sentence just a concise introduction about what the story is for the journalist. And I was able to do that with ChatGPT. However, the quality of it wasn't particularly great, but if I just was more specific and more precise with my prompts, telling it to be concise, I found it improved it a little bit. And so the key takeaways I'd say from this is good outputs rely on great inputs. So this is an emerging skill. So basically, I think Andrew was saying early on, you can tell it to act in certain ways. So act as a journalist and write like this. do it in the style of this, you know, etc., to really improve the outputs that you're getting from this. And we can also use it as a second brain, as I mentioned, from ideation, or just to kind of like checking some maths, or even just playing around with Excel. But also it's important to verify, because it is willing to lie. I put in a prompt a couple of weeks back, I think it was, and I asked it for some sources, and it came back with something that I thought was absolute gold. But then when I clicked on the links, actually none of the URLs worked. And what I found out is that actually it just made them up. So make sure that you double check for sure.
Sorry, Mark. Thanks for that. Really interesting how far you've gone in such a short period of time in using it for generative applications. What do you think? I mean, we're seeing it applied equally in the media to write stories. Do you think we should be labeling the content that we produce that has been generated using AI?
I think that's an interesting question. So what I think will probably happen, and probably already is happening, is that the content will be produced by AI, but then edited by a human. So it may be a case where you get the author as AI and the person who edited it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you know, and then we're using content. I'm just thinking here about that. You know, future data sets are going to be built on the content that we're creating at the moment and posting onto the internet using AI. Are we not going to end up with some sort of singularity here? And we literally are filling the internet with more and more content.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely going to be a challenge. I think really, I think it comes back to the prompts again. I think if everyone's doing the same prompts, everyone's going to get the same outputs or similar outputs. So you kind of need to be creative with your prompts to get something different when it kind of comes out the other side.
Right. I know you do a lot of work in digital SEO. Have you thought about the impact there? I mean, there's this big conversation about going on in that area of the industry because GPT-3 gives you one answer rather than a range of answers. Is that something you've looked at and thought about yet?
So I think one of the main challenges will be, I guess, yeah, if everyone is using it and everyone is producing the same content, then there's no differentiation. I think people are going to have to think a little bit differently. And basically, maybe if you have a recipe website that was just content written before, maybe you're going to have to add some video to that or something. Or in terms of websites ranking in Google, if all the content looks the same, Google may look at other factors and put a little bit more emphasis on how the website ranks. For example, if the content is all the same, but one has more links to it and better quality links, then that one's probably going to rank more. So I imagine that links are going to become more important for SEO as a result of this.
Right. Okay. There's conversation in some of the tech media last week about Bing, the GPT-3 chatbot on Bing, taking users to some fairly dark places. I mean, you've talked about misinformation and just false content. Have you you've had any extraordinary results out of it? Yeah.
Yeah. One I mentioned was when I found I wanted it to do some research for me, and I thought this is great. And I just told it, can you cite the URLs? And they were just all completely wrong and incorrect.
Right.
Another thing that I found was interesting with Bing was that I asked it for some information about myself, and something was wrong. Like it got something incorrect, and Bing gives you the annotation, you know, where it came from. And I looked, and actually, what it had done, it put like an ad there. It wasn't anything that I'd said. It just put an ad from another website into it, and it used that as a source. Basically, it was like a PPC campaign within the Bing chatbot.
Weird, odd. Is it going to impact jobs, do you think?
Yes, I think it will, but I kind of think it's going to be a little bit different. I mean, technology comes about and changes things all the time. You know, in the supermarkets, we didn't have any self-service, and now we do, but we still need humans to operate that. So I think what we're going to have is essentially operators and prompt engineers to create everything. I mean, so this stuff is still going to need fact checking. This stuff is still going to need editing. And it's at the moment, it's still not as good as content created by a human.
Right. Okay. Really, really Thank you for your insights, Mark. And you know, like with Andrew, it's really interesting to see how you've used this in anger in practice and the results you're getting out of it. I really appreciate your time, and I urge people to go and check you out, look you up on LinkedIn. Your Twitter URL was
My Twitter is I am Rofe. So
I am Rofe.
yeah.
Again, apologies to everyone that the chat function isn't working, but go and find Mark on Twitter. I will share everyone's contact details afterwards as well. Mark, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Right, next up, Maya Koleva from she's head of research and insight from Commetric. I contacted Maya after she'd posted a really thoughtful perspective actually about the application of AI for measurement, public relations measurement and media evaluation, and that's what she's here to talk about. Maya, are you here?
Yep.
Maya, sorry, Maya.
I told you that the Koleva bit is not such a okay, it's fine. It's Maya. Yeah.
Yeah.
On Twitter.
You're very welcome.
I'm on Twitter. You can find me at notoyellow, without space, without dashes, notoyellow.
Okay, we'll come out. We'll have a conversation about what you're on Twitter. I do later, but you're very welcome. Please, I'm going to mute myself and shut up. Floor's yours.
I hope you see my screen now. Yep, I'm very happy to be here with you today. I'm Maya Koleva, so I'm the head of research and insight of Commetric, and I'm also part of the international board of directors of AMEC. I was formally introduced in the event promotion as measurement maven, and it's a very high honor. Thank you, Stephen. And in case you wonder, this is a measurement maven working on a new methodology according to OpenAI's DALL-E 2, and this is actually pretty accurate. This is what I do most of my time. Yeah, so I am going to jump straight to our topic today. So AI's impact on PR measurement specifically has been discussed for years. AI-based models are already in use for aspects of PR measurement, broader media intelligence, and risk monitoring. And this applies to PR agencies, to in-house analytics teams, and to specialized measurement and evaluation agencies like the one I work for. And different AI models are utilized to scale up, to improve methods, to build up services and products. And broadly speaking, there are two options for embedding AI in a PR measurement practice. One is to purchase an off-the-shelf solution and align with the third-party taxonomy that it provides. And the other is to invest in in-house machine learning and data science capabilities so that you can create custom models using historic data. And AI-based models assist in various PR measurement and evaluation tasks and use cases. Specifically, large language models like ChatGPTs are already used for content summarization, message put-through analysis, key phrase extraction, sentiment analysis, and others. And with the public launch of ChatGPT, experimenting with such large language models and what they can do is more accessible than ever. It comes back to the point of democratization that Andrew raised earlier. I spent a lot of time in the past few months testing individually with ChatGPT and then also with the API playground mode. And I'm also fortunate to work with an outstanding in-house machine learning team, and they work directly via the GPT API. So there are slight differences. But now I'm going to focus on 5 use cases that I have personally tested for the needs and purposes of PR measurement through ChatGPT in the chat module. So number 1 is very obvious. It's summarization. Large language models like ChatGPT are optimized to understand text and to summarize it neatly. So with your prompt, you can request different types of summary, long, short, in bullets, with simplified language, or from the viewpoint of a specific stakeholder. But note that ChatGPT, you should provide the full text. Why? Because don't expect ChatGPT to summarize from link. It can't read the web yet. So it will just take the keywords from the URL and come up with a summary that sounds legit, but is factually wrong. In my example here, the article that in question does not mention at all Joe Rogan's podcast, but the keywords yielded the model to come up with a summary based on a podcast appearance from 2014, which definitely sounded legit. Then number 2, sentiment. I tested with both long-form media content and with social media posts. And my specific case here is Twitter shares of news headlines. I did extensive testing, and I can comfortably say that GPT-3 model returns entity-centric sentiment more accurate than what you would find on most tools and listening platforms out there. There are, of course, tricky cases, and they remain tricky for all large language models, but there certainly has been improvement in recent times compared to other tools I've tried. So be careful with things like double negatives, irony, and multiple entities with different sentiment placed close to each other in the same context. Number 3, messaging extraction. And this can work miracles, and I expect to see this implemented in live products in the PR measurement space, like crisis and risk monitoring dashboards. So it can work on individual pieces of content, but it can also work on batch of items. So my tip is to be specific in prompts and know the limits. GPT models have a window limit of memory of what they can read and what they can think about in their responses. So for instance, in ChatGPT, it might be around like 4,000 words, but through the API, it might be a little bit more, towards 8,000. So you have to check, and it can summarize a normal article or maybe a few articles, but it would not be able to process a full long report. So, and the other thing is that you might need to reprompt it often because it will forget literally what was the original prompt. And then beware of the so-called hallucinations. So this is the test I run, and this is actually the one thing I posted on LinkedIn. So basically, I gave ChatGPT a set of tweets, or were like 30, I think, a very small sample size in normal scenario, but just for the test. So I asked the model to extract positive and negative messaging for a concept. In this case, the concept was patent pooling. And ChatGPT provided pros and cons, and they sounded really legit. However, I knew my input data very well. So I spotted that one of these kind of pros was not actually, it's not in my input data. And I asked for an example, give me a quote, where do you see it? And then it neatly apologized and said that actually this was more of a general benefit, a general positive messaging, not something mentioned in the content at all. So this is something you have to be careful when you experiment and when you design, especially if you need to integrate this right away in your workflow. There are slight risks, and you definitely should be a domain level expert in the input and the team that you're giving it. Number 4, classification against predefined taxonomy. So in your prompt, you need to explain the context, but you also need to provide definitions for each of the classes. And you have to monitor the output. It may not be consistent, which is not surprising. Large language models do this, and if you ask them the same thing 100 times, it is likely that it will give you different answers. Not all of the time, but there will be different answers, and this is expected behavior. I also check whether it works well on all of the classes that you define. So in my case, that's a typical one in PR measurement. Is a piece of content, is a brand mention proactively driven? Is it a reactive content, or is it organic mention? And it worked perfect, like literally 10 out of 10 for one of the classes, proactive, less good on another, the reactive class, and totally lost in the third class, what is organic content. And it might be the fault of not a good enough definition, or maybe there's just not enough data to back this up. But this is a specific use case, and it's a tricky one indeed. And this is the kind of PR measurement tasks that in my field we're trying to automate and make smarter and better. And this is one of the examples where machine learning based on pre-tagged data, historic data for specific taxonomy might work out better. But it's still something that we are exploring closely. And then last but not least, this is my number 5, Boolean query creation. If I need to pick a single ChatGPT use case that has the most tangible and measurable effect on my work as it is now, this is it. Never been easier and faster. ChatGPT can build for me in seconds a complex Boolean just following plain text instructions. And you can request synonyms, phrases used in specific contexts, like for instance, news media. You can ask for a list of companies from a sector. You can add exclusion criteria. So you may need to go through several prompts and reprompts to kind of fine tune it. But in my experience, from my experiments, it cuts the average time to construct even a more complex Boolean query by at least 80%. And why this matters? Because I can now be much more efficient in testing volumes, producing simple quant measurement reports, setting up content gathering for measurement programs, and getting pricing estimations back to clients faster. And why ChatGPT is so good in this? Because it works with the OpenAI's Codex model. And this codex model is designed to help with programming tasks. It is actually the backbone behind HubSpot, no, the Copilot service, which is a GitHub Copilot service, which is exactly this. It helps programmers work faster and more efficient and acts as a QA. And that's my last slide. So after my quick 5 use cases, let's recap. So a single AI model, even the most advanced large language model, is likely going to address one metric at a time. Measurement programs rarely rely on single metric. So you may need a combination of different prompts using one model, or you might even need a combination of different models. In isolation, a single metric is just good to know. A metric makes sense when it is part of a well-defined measurement framework. So we'll get to this point. Whatever you do, you need to integrate the output of any model to a full data set with multiple quantitative and qualitative metrics. And the metadata, of course, in order to cross-refer metrics and to measure correlation. This means that a chat interface is not a scalable solution. There needs to be some types of integration via API, for example, or the kind of amazing tools that Andrew talked about. Even with the most advanced models, you still need to test, validate, and likely fine-tune the model with taxonomies applicable to you and your clients' specific measurement programs. There is an important point. We also need to understand copyright and licensing in relation to AI processing of content. And this is a gray area still. What is really fair use? And it's not about copyright and licensing of the content that is being trained on for models, but also what is allowed by publishers. Can you just paste an article and get a summary of it? Is this fair use? Is this allowed? So if you definitely know, please tell us all. Chat is not working, so shoot it out on Twitter, but it's valuable information. This is, I think, conversation in the industry we'll have to be having very seriously very soon. And finally, don't forget that solid PR measurement requires robust and transparent methodology and a meaningful measurement framework that is aligned to communication objectives, and it's measured against some sort of meaningful benchmarks. So using AI models will help us get more data faster, but you will still need to link the pieces together and make sense of it all and to really measure your PR campaign or strategy. And with this, I am done.
Maya, thank you so much. Do you want to close your screen? That was what a brilliant presentation. I knew that in fact, I really recommend people follow you on LinkedIn, because that's how originally we met, based on the experiments you were writing about and the information you shared. One of the things you said there was the GPT-3 models are better than the current applications of machine learning in tools within the industry. Do you want to talk a little? Is that right?
I knew it. You were going to ask me.
Oh, come on, the market. Come on.
You know, I mean,
is the market the market has been overhyped now. Is this, but clearly you've just shown 5 really brilliant examples.
You know, I can't name names, but let's put it out there. So I've tested almost any social listening platform, news monitoring platform. I know them quite well. Some of them are brilliant, bringing out results really fast, quite reliable, some less so. More often than not, you will see fast, scalable sentiment solutions that are based on very dumb models, working with libraries of words. These are your positive words, these are your negative words, and this is like your neutral words. And then based on the combination and proximity of those words around your target company, it would tell you this is positive or this is negative. My favorite example, I work a lot in healthcare, is any news around cancer treatment. And one of the examples I tested, if you noticed on my screen, was about a trial of a new cancer treatment. And the headline says, whatever companies were they, new product slashes cancer. No, so cancer therapy slashes melanoma risk. So cancer / and melanoma would be in the negative dictionary. And this is likely going to come up as a result that this is a negative item. This is what I've seen on many platforms, not most, many. And GPT didn't bother. I mean, it immediately found the context and the meaning, understood that this is media language. This is how reporters would write, and slash is not a bad word here, and cancer is just cancer. It's not necessarily bad. It's treatment.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. You knew I was going to ask that. You talked to me about token limits because you cautioned that to keep refeeding the tool, if you like, with content, because you use the word forget. I mean, you're already ascribing a sentience to
Yeah,
this.
I know. Sorry, I don't want to
No, that's all right. No,
anthropomorphize
it's
as
not at all. But would you just tell me what you mean by that?
So yeah, it works in a window. So around depending whether you use the chat interface or the API. So there is a set window of tokens or words. At one token is pretty much one word. So it only looks at like a set of 1,000 tokens above the point it's writing, and it includes its own output as well. So if it provides you a long answer, it will then remember only a short part of your original input. This means that you may need to reprompt it frequently if you use the chat interface, or if you use some sort of automation. Maybe the prompt is like by default the starting point. So you just have to test it out and see for yourself when you see that it becomes kind of confused. If we anthropomorphize again, in the beginning it's focused, and then it gets tired and it's not focused anymore and doesn't give you good responses. And then you remind it, hey, hold on, this is our task now.
Right. Okay. It's like a human being.
In the late afternoon.
Focus. Yeah. Maya, thank you so much. That was brilliant presentation.
Thank you.
We've recorded this, so it will be available to everyone. I'm certainly going to rewatch that, and the 5 applications you shared were just really insightful. Thank you. Thank you. See you later. Bye. So finally, we're heading to Lisbon. We're going to be joined by Bruno Amaral, who works at the Lisbon Collective. He teaches at Lisbon University. We got to know each other about 10 years or so ago in the infancy of social media. Bruno calls himself a digital strategist. I actually I've labeled him an intellect philosopher, and you'll find out why. Bruno, hello.
Hello there. How is everyone?
Good to see you. You've got a deck. Do you want to load that up, and I'll get out of your way and let you run through your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, are we here? Okay. So first, a little bit about myself. Yes, I've been on social media since the early stages. I began my blogging career in 2006. My story is that I got diagnosed with MS in 2019, and then the pandemic came. That's going to be relevant in a while now. I'm currently teaching PR, yes, in the School of Communication and Media Studies. And the Lisbon Collective came about because of what I started developing, which was Gregory AI, which is a tool that started in 2021 to help and speed up medical research and innovation in any field. So let's go back to the topic. AI is more than ChatGPT. Like all the other panelists I've showed you, there are a lot of things going on, but this is a very old science, let's call it. Machine learning, computer vision, NLP, all of these things have been around for a long time. What happens today is that for the first time, we don't need expensive hardware, and we have access to stuff like the ChatGPT and a few other tools that can make this available to anyone. So the barrier to entry is going down very fast. We do need to keep in mind that the kind of outputs that we get is either from inference or from generating. So what we're seeing from the ChatGPT is it can produce new content. It can generate a response based on the data that it has all the way back from 2021. And the same as the Midjourney and the DALL-E system. They can give us that. On the triangle that you see here on the other side, this is what I usually tell my students and others that I work with, that all the internet is made out of data. And it's only when we put data together that we can start building up information. But that information can only become content when we can actually apply it to a relevant purpose or to help us make a decision. And for the first time, the AI tools are going from data to generating information that we can then use. We can discuss if they are able to produce knowledge or not. I believe that in terms of generating images, we could consider that knowledge because it can recreate styles, it can recreate writing. So the barrier between that generative content and whether it is actual knowledge or not is very thin, to the point that I think that we could go forward and consider it the first stages of AI knowledge. But what is the future of PR and what is Gregory AI? So Jenna Burrell, who knows more about this than I do, said that coming out with the truth is much trickier than having enough data. And I think that's exactly what we need to focus on. I think we have a very strong opportunity here for us to become the custodians of the data set. Andrew and Mark were saying exactly that the input that you give the AI system will influence the quality of the output, of course. So how can we make sure that that result is good enough? And how can we make sure that it represents all the stakeholders? Because what we've been finding out is that the ChatGPT training set came with a lot of bias attached. It's mostly Anglo-Saxon because most of the internet is written in English, even when the authors like me are not native speakers. And also sometimes that information doesn't have context and it's sometimes wrong. I asked it for a Portuguese recipe, and once ChatGPT decided to show me that exact same recipe, but saying that it was Brazilian, which is understandable because it's the same language, but totally different cultures. So without that context, without knowing what the purpose of that information is for, ChatGPT was just a tiny bit off. And then quality measurement. And this was mostly what Maya was talking about. We have to keep asking it questions to make sure that the result is consistent. And this goes back not just to the user experience, but it can also go forward when these digital assistants start acting as chatbots and automating our communication between the corporation and the user. Most corporations are trying to implement their user support systems on top of chatbots, but those chatbots can only understand the intent of the user, and they are still not ready for prime time. One day they will be, but their tone of voice and their way of engaging with the user needs to be assured in terms of corporate consistency by the public relations departments. That is my view, at least. And of course, faster production. The thing about faster production is we've been seeing a lot of examples and everyone comes down to the same conclusion, which is amazing, is this is good enough, it's just not as good as I want it to be. And it's exactly that. Everything seems mediocre now. Everything is average. As soon as we give it a good prompt, we can get back an average answer. In that case, our role is to take that answer higher so that the barrier or the quality level needs to increase so that we can not just do our work better, but also with a level of detail that we haven't been able to do in the past. Like Mark was showing us when he was trying to create the templates using ChatGPT. And I think there's also a space here for what we're doing with Gregory AI. Because what Gregory does is he gathers searches from across the science journals, and he can identify if it's relevant or not for the patient. He can identify if, based on my training, if the paper that he found can actually bring improvements to the quality of life and to the symptoms of the patient. And it can help filter out the noise, because if you look at PubMed, for example, the rate at which we are publishing new papers is insane, and there is no way that humankind can keep up with it. And there's a place for these AI systems to intervene and to help filter out that noise. But then there's another problem here. Okay, so the system was trained by me, and I do not have any knowledge on neurology. So there is a problem here, which is the input that I gave it is not precise. So there always needs to be someone within the field, either in this case, a doctor, or in our case, someone in PR with a clear understanding of what is quality and what is quality content to be able to start filtering out. And I brought an ace up my sleeve. So lately I've been working on a new project that still doesn't have a name. And the idea here is if we can feed a data set to an AI system, we can then ask it precise questions. This is what is called the vector search. So in vector search, you can ask a precise question and you get a precise answer back. But what we're doing here is, and I don't think I have that slide here. No, I don't. What we're doing here is we can also allow it to track back where it got that information from. So whenever you ask one of these queries, you get back the response, and the system tells you, this is your response, and this is where I found it from. And it goes back to a lot of things that we were talking about, which is the validation, the fact-checking. And the fact-checking needs to be faster. There's a new category on Fiverr just for fact-checking, for example. And there's a whole section just for AI tools in Fiverr as well. So this being one of the best marketplaces for freelancers, it tells a lot about where this market is going. There's still a very strong need for humans to be the custodians of the data set and of the output of the AI systems. So I think this is it. Any questions? I can't hear you.
Sorry, do you want to show your deck? Sorry, thank you. That was a brilliant, completely humbling presentation. Do you want to show your deck and we'll just have a chat?
Oh, sorry, I thought this was still shared. Do you see it now?
Yeah. Don't worry. It doesn't matter. We can talk anyway. You talked about the issue of building knowledge. Do you see this application applied to MS? Are you building knowledge here, or are you what level of abstraction is this in?
I think we're still on the level of categorizing and filtering out the noise. This isn't knowledge yet. It will become knowledge if we can ask it precise questions, like, for example, what is the best medicine for this specific case? And instead of reading over 1,000 case studies, we can have the system find that information for us.
Okay. What do you think the impact then is for the future of education and how we teach? I know we're already hearing, essays being AI checked as well as plagiarism checked. Are we going to have to change how we teach?
I'll give you another example. Let's not talk about AI, because I don't think it's going to change how we teach. It's going to change what we teach. Most students now, whenever you ask them to come up with a presentation or anything that requires graphic design, they will use Canva because it's easy. It's there. It's another tool. So are we going to prohibit them from using Canva, or are we going to teach them how to use it in a way that makes their presentation stand out and not look like yet another template? I think that's the problem that we need to solve.
Okay.
Teaching them how to use these tools and how to make the output even better than their counterparts.
No, the question is, there's obviously a huge conversation going on in the education field about the impact of AI on teaching and how that might change. Another question, we didn't recognize the opportunity, 10, 15, 20 years ago, that social media might be applied and weaponized, and all the issues we now understand relating to misinformation and the impact on democracy and conversation, corruption of the public sphere and conversation. Are we ahead of AI, do you think, this time round? In terms of no, we're not. No.
There's a YouTube channel called Smarter Every Day, and he has a series of 3 videos where he explains the problem with automatically generated content for YouTube and how it is used to weaponize misinformation. And as far as I know, this is not on our agenda. This is not in our list of things to worry about. So I think AI has already been here. It's only becoming visible now.
It's visible, and it's visible and very apparent because of these new range of applications.
And it's already being weaponized. So it's time to step up and move faster.
And that requires presumably government intervention and some sort of oversight.
There are a lot of attempts to not just audit these systems, but also to give them more transparency. And although it's not a solution that I appreciate, because I rather we ourselves take on the onus of that responsibility, it is something that I see being required, because there's always going to be someone trying to game the system.
And on that note, that very sobering but very thoughtful, reflective point, I'd like to finish. Thank you, Bruno, for an exceptional presentation. And so we've covered applications of artificial intelligence. We've seen some of the excitement in our own sphere related to ChatGPT. We've seen many of the use cases in variety of different areas. I hope you've been inspired to go and explore this further. I'd urge you to check out the report that Andrew mentioned, published yesterday by the CIPR in the UK, written by Andrew and myself, Professor Anne Gregory, Jean Verlan, and Scott Brinker. That starts to cover some of the bigger issues related to the impact of AI on practice, but also looks at practical implications as well. I want to thank Andrew. I want to thank Mark, Maya, and Bruno. I want to thank you all for the participation. Apologies again that the chat function wasn't working, but I hope it has been no less an enjoyable experience because of that. We will post this to YouTube. We'll make a transcript available as well. I want to thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day, and until next time, goodbye.